Yesterday we were trying to understand the concept of ERP, what ERP is, and then we went on to understand the different modules in SAP, different types of users in SAP. Then we talked about the role of an ABAP consultant. We discussed what all the options we have to customize standard SAP software to meet your company's specific requirements, right? So we've seen that we can either modify the programs or enhance the programs or create our own programs, right? So we have modifications, enhancements, and customer developments. Then we've discussed what type of programs we develop typically as an ABAP consultant. So we've seen these RICF objects, reports, interfaces, conversions, extensions, and forms. Right. So we've seen what each type of program means. So no questions on that part. So today we'll talk about the architecture of an SAP system. We'll try to understand the different layers that make up your SAP system. So you must have come across this term SAP R3. Many people call it an R3 system. So but we no more call it R3 now. We call it an ECC system. That's ERP Central Component. Earlier it was called an R3 system. So in SAP R3, R represents is a real-time system where the moment you update data, one department update the data in the system, it's available for the other departments to consume immediately. So the data is exchanged across your organization in real time. So R represents it's a real-time system, and 3 represents it's a 3-tier architecture. So in SAP, we have this 3-tier architecture, right? You must have heard about different architectures like 2-tier architecture, 3-tier architecture, multi-tier architecture, right? In a 2-tier architecture, typically you'll have database and the client. So whenever somebody runs a program, the program should either execute in the client system or in the database server, right? Whereas in a 3-tier architecture, we have database, client, and in between, we also have one more layer called the application layer. So all your programs run in the application layer. There are quite a few advantages of 3-tier architecture compared to 2-tier architecture, right? For example, if the program has to run in the client system, then all the client systems should be very high-end systems, because when the program runs, it consumes a lot of CPU and memory and all these things. So if you're running your programs in the client system, in a client server architecture, then all your clients should be very high-end systems. And the second thing, tomorrow if your business logic changes, then you need to update this in all the client systems that are connected to the server, right? And if you want to keep your client system a low-end system, and you want to execute these programs in the database server, because we have only 2 systems, one database and one client. So if these programs run in the database server, then the role of the database is not only supplying the data, but also taking care of executing a program. So that also would cause a lot of load on the database server, right? So if too many people are connected at once, then it would cause a lot of load on the server and the system may crash. So to avoid these problems or to overcome these challenges, we have this 3-tier architecture where we have database, we have client, the presentation layer, the database layer, and we also have a application layer in between. So that when you run a program, the application layer will take care of executing the program. So the role of database here is limited to supplying the data. The role of client is limited to making the request. All the program execution will take place in the application layer. So today we'll try to understand this 3-tier architecture, what all it consists of. So in an RT system, we have one database server accessing a single database, one or more presentation servers, and one or more application servers. So we have presentation server, application server, and the database server. Then when you implement SAP in the company, we don't generally implement one system. We typically implement three systems. In any company, when they implement SAP, they would be implementing three systems. When I say system, all these three layers make up one system. The presentation layer, application layer, and the database layer. All these three layers make up one system. So why do we need three systems? So one system or database assigned to development, one system is assigned for testing, and one system is assigned for production. Now, your end users in the company, the people who are actually working in a company and who are using this SAP system in the company, the end users, they would always be using the production system. So whatever they want to create, if they want to create a sales order, they would be doing it in the production system, right? So that's your actual live system in your company, which has all the live data about your customers, vendors, orders, everything. All the data is there in the production system. So all the end users will be using the production system to do their day-to-day activities. Now, while this end user is working on one application in the production system, and if he feels there's an issue with the application, and if you want to fix that application as an ABAP consultant, I cannot make changes to the program directly in the production system, right? So you need to test your changes before confirming the changes, right? Your changes could affect something else. So you cannot directly go and change the change in the production system because it might spoil something. So what we do is, we'll be having one development system in which you'll be developing the applications. So once you develop the applications in your development system, we'll be moving that program to our quality system where you can test that application thoroughly. So you'll be testing your application, and if everything looks fine, then you'll be moving your changes to the production system where the end user can start using the program with the changes, right? So we never work in the production system directly, even though the end users will be using the production system to carry out their day-to-day activities. But if it requests any changes, we would first develop or make those changes in the development system and test it in the quality system. And if everything looks good, only then you'll be moving it to the production system. If you find some issues in the testing system, then you'll again fix them in the development and retest the application. So unless you're satisfied with the test results, the changes would not be moved to your production system, right? So I can understand you can't change something directly in the production system before you test your changes, because your changes could impact something else, right? So I can understand that you need a development system to develop your objects where you can make the necessary changes to the program. Then why do we need this testing system? Why can't I test in the development system itself? Why do we need a separate system for testing? Why can't I simply have one development system, one production system? So any changes the user asks, I can change it in the development system, test it in the development system itself, and then if everything looks good, I can move it to production system, right? So why do we need this testing system? Anyone would like to answer? I think it's not limited to SAP. Any software field, if you go in any technology, they follow the same pattern where they'll typically have three systems. The reason behind this is, in your development system, you'll never have the required test data to test your applications, because all the data, for example, let's say if Walmart is my customer, I'll maintain all the customer details directly in the production system. It's not necessary that you maintain that customer information in your development system. Since the production system is a live system, if you want to add a customer, you would add it to the production system directly. So if I'm developing something for, let's say I'm developing an invoice which is to be sent to the Walmart customer, then I need to test this invoice with the customer details, right? I need to give that details as the input and then take a printout of that invoice and see how it looks. So I need to test my applications with that particular customer details. But since the data about that customer won't be available in my development system, I cannot test my application with the real-time data, right? So what we do is, we refresh this quality system every 1 month, every 6 months, depending on the company. So different companies have different time schedule to refresh. In our company, we do it every month. So in my testing system, I'll have at least 1 month old production data at any given point of time. So all the data of the production system will be copied to your testing system at regular intervals. So since my testing system has all the data that is there in the production system, it's an exact copy of the production system. So if something works in the testing system, it should definitely work in the production system. So that's why we develop in the development system and move our changes to the testing system so that you can test your applications with more real-time data. And if something works in the testing system, then it should definitely work in the production system because it's just a copy of your production system. So this is a minimum configuration any company will have. They'll have one development system, one testing system, and one production system. In our company, we have 2 development systems, 2 testing systems, and 1 production system. So again, many companies can have different configuration. So every SAP system is based on a 3-layer client-server architecture comprising a presentation layer, an application layer, and a database layer. Right? So we have these 3 layers: the presentation layer, application layer, and the database layer. So we'll try to explore all these 3 layers in detail. So we have the presentation server here, the application server, and the database server. Now your presentation server can communicate with the application server, and the application server can communicate with the presentation server. The database server can communicate with the application server, and the application server can communicate with the database server. Your presentation server cannot communicate with the database server directly. That means you cannot connect to the database directly in the SAP system. So any request that you make should go through the application server. Okay, and in the database, we don't store all data in one table. We store data in multiple tables. For example, just give me a second. So, for example, if you talk about the material data, some information about the material is stored in one table. The general data about the material is stored in this table MARA. Here you can find the general data about a material. So when you create a material, the general data about the material is stored in this MARA table. And the material and its description, just by looking at the material number, you may not be able to identify what material it is, right? So we maintain some descriptions for the material, and those descriptions are stored in this MAKT table. So material descriptions are stored in this table. Now we also store some plant related data for the material, which plants this material is used. So that plant related data is stored in a different table, MARC. So in this MARC table, we store the plant related data. Now the storage location data, plant to storage location relationship, that is stored in another table. So the data about the material is not available in a single table. It's available in multiple tables, right? But there is something common between all these tables, right? There's a relationship between all these tables. That's your material number. Don't worry about the tables I'm opening. Just try to understand the concept. So in SAP, we don't store all the data in a single database table. We store the data in multiple tables, and there would be some relationship between all these tables. And that relationship is maintained by your RDBMS. So RDBMS is, so the database is managed by the RDBMS, Relational Database Management System. Right? So all the relations, different tables and its relations are maintained by RDBMS. So here you can see we have the presentation layer where the user's workstations are. Then we have the application layer, and then we have the database layer. Right? So let's try to explore these 3 layers in detail. What is the presentation layer? It's a program named SAP GUI.exe installed on user's workstation. The presentation interface, SAP GUI, enables the users to interact with the SAP system and enter or display data. SAP GUI accepts inputs from the users and sends this request to the application server for processing. You can think of this presentation layer as a web browser. If you want to open a website, you need a web browser, right? The web, whatever you type in the web browser will take care of communicating that with the web server. So without a web browser, you cannot connect to a web server. The same way, to connect to an SAP system, to connect to this application server or open any applications, we need this presentation layer, the SAP GUI. So when I say you'll get server access for when you enroll for this training, all you'll need to do is install this presentation layer in your system. Install this SAP GUI.